go.
Oh, God. One more. Oh, we've been waiting for you. All right, here I am. And I was watching you over there. You should be ashamed of yourself, man. I apologize. Apologies. Hi. It's supposed to be Jeff. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Schmeeckle Reserve. My name is Pearse. Thank you, Griff, for that marvelous introduction. A little bit about myself. I am a natural resource student here at University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. I am majoring in environmental education, interpretation, and museum studies. And you are all here to go on a little tour. We're going to take a little walk through Schmeeckle. We're going to start right here. We're going to do a loop around the Trail of Reflections and come right on back. And we're going to talk about the history of Schmeeckle Reserve and a little bit about Stevens Point itself. Well, I like to know who I'm talking to. Does anyone want to introduce themselves as well? Or where are you guys from? Anyone? Gotcha. All right. Well, tell me what this is.
Soil.
Soil?
Yeah.
It's an answer. Anything else? Anyone?
Bag of dirt.
Bag of dirt? Decent answer. Anyone else? No? Wish you weren't so awkward, bud. So I'm going to lay some of this in front of you. I want you to touch it. I want you to touch it, I want you to smell it, feel it, and then give me an answer more than soil or dirt. Give me a real answer. Whatever. Off the top of your head, what do you got?
Organic matter.
Organic matter. Dead components that have been broken down by microbes. What else?
There could possibly be some organisms.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you got microorganisms in there. Maybe some little bugs or something. I just pulled it this afternoon. Yeah. What about legacy? What about farmer sweat? What about footprints of students? What about stardust? Could it be that as well? Definitely. You go back enough further through time, this started at the center of the universe. It has passed through time immemorial, through phase after phase after phase, beyond your wildest comprehension, more than the human mind can fully grasp. When I start, I like to start back at the beginning. Over 150 million years ago, all the collective landmass on the Earth was in one megacontinent that today we call Pangea. Exactly. And over many, many, many millennia, Pangea suffered a schism. Great earthquakes ruptured the continent. The inside of the Earth bubbled with magma as volcanoes came up and spewed their ash into the air, bringing down the global temperature and bringing on great ice ages. And as this continent continued to fracture, it split apart in this great schism, and a large chunk of that supercontinent started to drift across the great water that was across the globe. And the supercontinent continued to drift and drift and drift for millions upon millions of uncountable years until it formed an ocean between that continent and the rest of the continent. And we call this North America. And on this continent were mountain ranges that were larger than the Himalayas. As far as the eye could see, there were redwoods from one end to the other end, and great dinosaurs still trekked across. And for tens of millions of years, all sorts of natural cycles came upon this continent, from the ocean levels rising, to storms, to great sheets of glaciers coming down and up, and all these mountain ranges got withered down to dust as mountain ranges like the Appalachians got withered down into little fragments that went down into the Gulf of Mexico. And even just north of here, in a place called Wausau, there's a mountain called Red Mountain. Any of y'all heard of it? that those are some of the oldest rocks that we know of today on the North American continent, and that at one time it was grander and more jagged than the Grand Teton, all brought down by the Ice Age. And all that sand got washed down into what is now Schmeeckle Reserve. The first peoples were the Native Americans. They were here with the land, and they lived here in relative peace for most of the time. But as we come through time and we get to how we got here, Europeans, I'm saying, does anyone know one of the first Europeans to come to this area? Well, no, I mean like this area specifically, like here in Wisconsin. He was a French fur trader, French Canadian. There's a lake named after him, not far from here. John Dubé. So Lake Dubé is just north of here. John Dubé is probably the first European to come to this area when we think about 1790. He had stayed at the Indian village that was just west of the Wisconsin River, and he had gone back and forth to a trading post that was actually just northeast of this area. And it was he who had helped get some of the early people to come through here because there were trees so thick, so large, and all about the place that people could barely get through. The only way that you could get through this part of the area, which was known as the Great North Wood, was by following the Indian trails. And that's what he had done. But another great way to get around Wisconsin, in a far more efficient way at the time, was by the way, anyone got a guess? River. Bingo, exactly. There's two major rivers around here. What are they? The Wisconsin and the Plover. Bingo. This part of Wisconsin is at the absolute heart of the state. And the main river, the Wisconsin River that cuts through it, goes right through this area. It is a major superhighway that the Native Americans used for time immemorial. They still use it today. They use it for trading, they use it for travel, they use it for communication. And this same waterway is going to be a superhighway for the logging industry that built the nation that we all know and love today. So, moving forward, in my mind, moving forward. Some of the earliest surveys of this area were done by a gentleman named Hathaway. Now, Hathaway was actually a veteran of the American Revolution. I believe he had served with Nathaniel Greene or somebody like that. And he was also one of the first to break ground for the Erie Canal. And he had gotten a bid to come here and do a survey on a 6-mile stretch of the Wisconsin River on both sides. And this became known as the Lumberman's Treaty as well. And this stretched from what is now Wisconsin Rapids all the way to Wausau. And along this spot, there would eventually, within about, a few years of his time, there would be a lumber baron setting up a warehouse by the name of George Stevens. And the loggers would go up and down the river, and then they would stop at this warehouse to have a drink, because it was the halfway point. So Stevens Point actually got started over a drink. Imagine that. So, but George Stevens had his warehouse at this little point in the Plover River. He didn't stick around very long, but his name sure did. So, as we go on our little adventure today, we're gonna each get a lantern. We're gonna go down around to the right here and do a big loop around and coming back. As we do so, we have to be safe because it's dark. So everyone gets a lantern. I want you to mind your footing, mind each other, don't go off of the boardwalk, and if anyone has any health conditions or allergies or anything like that, please do let us know right now. And I also have a first aid kit as well. Do we have any questions? No? Cool. Well, if y'all would like to come up, you can brush your dirt off to the side, and we will issue your lanterns and get on our merry way. examine history, or many historians examine history, we look for signs. Kind of like on a road, you're looking for a sign to show your way. But we're looking for signs that point us to the way of the past, like right here. So the logging industry had come through this way and cut through the old growth forest like a scythe. The reserve would have been 200-300-year-old trees plus, and they would have all been laid, and the Wisconsin River would have been log jammed from top to bottom. Pretty much, we're in the middle of the age of exploitation. And after it had been exploited and most of the trees cut down, it was used for farming. Anybody here know what kind of farming that it was used for? Trying to assess your knowledge a little bit.
Corn?
They tried corn. Didn't work. Soybeans didn't really work here either. Cabbage? I think they might have tried it. I didn't hear much about it. So they had tried farming, but then they discovered that, wow, there's a huge layer of granite like 3 to 6 inches down. So you couldn't really get anything that deep, but you had a lot of grass. So you were able to do dairy farming. So this area all became dairy farming, and Wisconsin became known as the dairy state. And this was probably farmland for 100 years, 125 years, give or take. And we still have remnants of it here today. So we're gonna move forward, and then we're gonna go around to the boardwalk. But I wanted to show you guys. Schmeeckle is scattered with these all over the place. Mud. When these started, we were at the very early days. The loggers came through, they cut everything down. We were in the farming days. And as we proceed into the 20th century, there's still some farming, but she's starting to come back. We're getting more trees are coming around, more natural areas, some floodplains are starting to return. So this is an interesting stretch because it actually reveals how that would look through time. Because it's cut and flooded over here, and then we're gonna go into the forest. So I want you to imagine in your heads as we transcend the decades and transcend the ages to our next stop. That one. The Big Frechette, as they call that one in the 1880. And that bad boy, it had started on Friday, June 4th. And by the second day, it had already risen about 38 inches, the water line. And then by the 14th, it had risen 7 feet. And it had gone, the Wisconsin River became a lake, and so did the city itself. And the water line had come all the way up here into Schmeeckle Reserve. So the farmland was almost completely inundated. And I think it was Farmer Meighan. I think his cows had actually walked to like a little island that was in the middle of this whole thing, and it was a spectacle for the locals as they were going by on their boats. They're all like, "Hey, there's Farmer Meighan's cows," and they're all on like this little island just mooing away, they're like minding their own business in the middle of this flood. And interestingly enough, no lives were lost of the locals. But there was a railroad feller who had been in the area, and he had slipped and fallen, and I think he was up by like Dubay, and he was the only loss of life that was so cool. Well, thanks for asking. And you got like a whole.
So how did this not become flooded? What did they do?
They restored the floodplain by. Oh God, what is it? Someone tell me. They had said it before. I'm brain farting. Moses Creek, that's it. And then, of course, modern infrastructure as well. They took it over. Yep. 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 On the Wisconsin. Yeah. It wasn't until all of that. So that 1880 flood I was reading, they had some like control effects on the river where loggers had set up actual logs as jams, and I think by the third day that had gave way, and a lot of the locals saw it because it all came rushing down the river, and they looked at it and they went,
that ain't good. And sure enough, within a few more days, they were all leaving their houses. And those who were on the lower plane, the women and children and the elderly, were moving into the houses of those who were a little bit more fortunate. And then they had, I think while it was raining still, the first couple of days, the town had called for a whole bunch of men to come out and start digging out Moses Creek, thinking that it was going to help, and it absolutely had the opposite effect. It made it even worse. But we know these things nowadays. So to get to the point of the local area, as we're getting into the 20th century, moving on to the 1930s and the 1940s and the 1950s, the farmers are starting to sell off their parcels, right? The land has been depleted. It was never really good for crops to begin with. It was dairy farming. Even that wasn't doing so hot at the time. And they were getting offers to sell. So they started to sell. And who did they start selling to? To the local school. They sold it to the university. So over time it had collected it. Now, but even long before the university started buying it, there was a gentleman by the name of Fred Schmeeckle who had come to the area. He was from Nebraska, and he came here as an agricultural teacher. But it was very soon that he had realized the history of the area and the age of exploitation, that it had been cut down, it had been abused, and he thought that that story needed to be told, and that we need to be having conservation education here as well. And conservation education in the United States was born in that moment. Fred Schmeeckle would take students up to the reserve, that wasn't Schmeeckle Reserve yet, and take them on little field excursions and talk about the wildlife, talk about the history, talk about all of it, so that they learned proper, good conservation care, much like we still do today. And that became the first conservation degree in the United States, right here at the heart of Wisconsin in good old Stevens Point. So as we move forward, think of the forest restoring itself through Schmeeckle's vision as we get into the mid 20th century of the 60s and the 70s. So Fred Schmeeckle did what very few of us get to do. And that is start a tradition that becomes a legacy. Like I said, over the years, he would bring students out here on excursions to learn about the flora, the fauna, the wildlife, the nature, everything that could be understood. The students quickly began to love this area before it was even Schmeeckle Reserve. And that grew over time. So much that when, let's say, careless people would walk through the area and flip their cigarette butts, they would accidentally start fires. And then they would have raging fires here. And then the students, very eager to get away from their studies, would come running out here with everything they could, from fire brigade buckets and plows as well, to pretty much dig ditches. And you can see remnants of that as they would dig, God, what would you call it? I forgot the actual word for it, excuse me. But it's pretty much like a trench. And then the fire would come up to it and it would try to stop it, essentially. So this became a local tradition, not the fighting the fires, but people coming out here. There were other students that had come out and they had set up a little camping area with picnic tables, with a grill and all that. This became the city's retreat. There were other propositions as well. People thought it would make great student housing. It would make a great parking lot. There was also the idea of putting a sports stadium out here. All these ideas were floated around and actually taken seriously. But as we all know, that is not what happened. It was in the mid-1970s that Schmeeckle Reserve was actually dedicated as a reserve. And then, of course, the name that would be bestowed upon it would be Fred Schmeeckle himself, forever instilling his legacy of preservation, conservation, and learning from our past. So I have some more dirt soil legacy for y'all. Anyone who doesn't want to hold any can, but I got a little bit here. And I want you to tell me about this soil. Is it different from the soil I gave you earlier? If so, how so? I guess wait till I dish it out to everyone before we start doing it. Analyze, interpret, sniff it, taste it, eat it, whatever you gotta do to get a good grip on it. What do we got?
A lot of rocks.
A lot of rocks, exactly. What more?
Topsoil.
Topsoil?
Seems
Yep.
like it.
It's gravelly, right?
Yeah.
It's hard, right? It's different from the other stuff, right? The first stuff I pulled off from our first stop up there by the floodplain. This stuff I pulled out just right here behind me. Got granite in there, right? That's reminiscent of, you know, that layer down there. But that didn't come up from the farmers. That came up from natural processes. There would be great fractures in that bedrock down there, you know, cracks, etc. And we know Wisconsin, it rains, it gets wet. It's a nice summertime. It rains, it gets wet. It freezes because it's wintertime. It's all unbearably cold. It's like the steps of Russia. God, it's coming, and I know it. And then it freezes, right? And then as it freezes, just like the roads in this state, they burst. And so you actually see these rocks and boulders all around Schmeeckle Reserve. These are actually not, well, some of them are, but not all of them are from farmers. Some are pretty much just popped out of the ground like zits over time from that fish that happened in the bedrock below. So now how do we feel about this soil? Is it more than just rocks and dirt and topsoil? Yeah. What is it? Someone give me something good.
History.
History, exactly. It's history. Unbelievable generations, unsurmountable generations, from us standing here holding it today, going back to the tribes who love this area so much still to this day, all the way to stardust from the beginning of the universe, as well as farmers' sweat and cow manure and God knows what else. All right. So we got one more stop on our grand adventure, ladies and gentlemen. Are we all still doing good? All right, got all our fingers and our toes and our minds. Gentlemen, it's still attached? Good. All right, let's go. Came down from Canada and burned the White House, you know, which was, you know, kind of busted our ego up as a nation a little bit. So we thought, well, we need to do something about it. And there was a fort called Fort McHenry, which is where we got the Star Spangled Banner and all that. But that fort held off an entire British Armada, which was really, really cool. So we thought we should build more of these forts. And so we built them going along the entire eastern seaboard, all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, because we had just recently gotten Florida from the Spanish at gunpoint. We're pretty good at that. And, and so we built these 3 forts there, Fort Pickens, Fort Barrancas, and then another one that's no longer there. But we had built all these forts, and they worked great, but the only time we used them was when they fired upon each other in the American Civil War. So, but anyway, you didn't ask, but that was another spot that I had done.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
cool. Any other questions from anybody? No, I like questions. I end up on these very, very long rambles. I've taken to saying short story long instead of long story short. So, God, now I got to get back on track here. Schmeeckle Reserve is a lot of things. There's legacy, but also a lesson as well. She is a lesson to what can happen if we neglect and abuse the land. We can come in, we can get it by shady means, through treaties or however, and then completely log it out and then flood natural areas, like the rivers that we flooded with all the logs going to build a nation. And then digging out ditches that are actually natural floodplains. We can give them a little bit of sway because they didn't know. But the beautiful thing, the redeeming quality, is that over time we can learn more, and over time we can do better. And that is a profound component of Schmeeckle Reserve, especially when it comes to the university and the legacy that we have set up. That we can start with good intentions, but the road to hell is awful paved with good intentions, but we can come back. And Schmeeckle Reserve, I think, is a really, really good message when it comes to bringing things back. So we started at the very beginning of the world to Pangea fracturing and the continents separating and coming here, and all the multiple ice ages that had shaped the North American continent into what it is today, and all the weathering and the glacial sheets that washed this place out with sand and water on top of that bedrock, the Native Americans, the early European settlers that had come here, the logging industry, and then setting up a town on a floodplain. And then the years and years of havoc that had reached, but also the years and years of memory and legacy as well. And then getting to Fred Schmeeckle coming in and realizing that this can be more than just an old abused logging area with some dairy cows. This can be a place where history takes a turn. This can be a place where history has meaning, and where we started the very first conservation education degrees in the United States and have set up a name for ourselves that we can be proud of as pointers, as locals, and as strangers coming to the area as well. Even today, I had a phone interview with Olympic National Park, and I was talking with the guy there, and he said, "Oh, Stevens Point, that's Schmeeckle Reserve there. I think we have one of your alumni here." We're pretty well known. We are at the heart of history here at Schmeeckle Reserve. So sometimes she may not look like much, sometimes she may seem average, but she's got far reaches that now transcend the globe. And we're a part of that legacy, even just standing here rambling about it, listening to my shameless lies. So I hope that you have enjoyed yourself this evening. I have really, really had fun. And I hope that you all have a lovely evening and a lovely week. This is where I will conclude the program. As well, if you ever feel compelled, Schmeeckle Reserve is always looking for volunteers, aides, join the friends group, anything like that, or just go for a trail. Simply attending and spending your time here gives Schmeeckle value, and I want to thank you all very much.